got to be careful with making sure that the people that do have the guns legally are the right people, or that they're sane people that can own guns. Again, there's not much more than we can do. I think that we're just protecting what we have is my biggest support of that, of the Second Amendment.
I agree. I think battling what we already have is enough. I mean, is a full-time duty. I mean, you can just see, I think the biggest travesty that we see today is this couple in Missouri being prosecuted for what is clearly their right to do what they did. Missouri has a castle doctrine. I mean, defending your home doctrine. So this prosecutor is clearly going against Missouri's Constitution, Missouri's law, and those are the kinds of things that would have to be stopped. It's about the enforcement of what's on the books. It's following the Constitution, and we need to get rid of prosecutors and judges that won't follow those kinds of, or legislators, whatever, what have you. But it's I think that right now is clearly one of the marquee things that you see going across the country is trying to defend this couple.
All right. So this is an issue more for students, or that's important to students, and it's what would you do to bring down college tuition for students in the state of Michigan?
Get government out. The costs have skyrocketed because of the growth of Pell Grants and loans. There's no, this isn't rocket science. Everybody knows this. If the schools know that they have guaranteed seats. Why do you think they build so many buildings? Because they know if they can fill them up with more loans and more grants. We have got to stop the federal government from getting out of the higher ed business, period. None of this, getting rid of student loans. The government shouldn't be in the business in the first place. That's, I think, the biggest thing as far as higher ed goes, is to stop this just flagrant use of loans and grants. And all it does is empower colleges and universities to do the very thing we don't want them to do. Look at these kids out on the street today. These are indoctrination centers. They're not getting any real skills that are being passed on. Not to the degree that they should. How many people do you know with Michigan degrees that are sitting at home and debating in their parents' basement? That has got to stop, as well as I think on a K-12 level, parents have got to be able to buy their own education with their own tax dollars. You've got to stop this idea of funding public education, funding teachers unions. That's all we're doing, and administrators that adhere to the teachers union. Give the parent the money, their own money back, and say, buy an education on the open market.
Mr. Patrick?
Tim, that's what you start off with is kids nowadays, and education my youngest was at Wayne State, and he said, Dad, this is a ripoff. And I said, yeah, I know it's a ripoff, but you gotta go. When I went to Grand Valley, I came out with zero debt. Back in the 80s, you could go to school and pay for it and get out of school with zero debt. Today, I can't even imagine a kid being able to get out of school with $100,000 in debt to get a $30,000 a year job. And then, like Tim said, the compounding of interest on these debts, you'll never pay it off. I mean, my God, if you were a doctor, you're gonna die with your student debt. So imagine just being a social worker, where you get out of school and you're making $30,000, and you've got this $100,000 bill dragging behind you. College tuition has got to be refigured. And when U of M has enough money in their bank that they can let 100 years, or there was an astronomical amount of years of students to come through for free, and they would still never spend their endowment. That's criminal. We have definitely wrecked the opportunities that college provided for kids nowadays.
Mr. Langworthy?
Well, I believe it starts because the Federal Department of Education ends up pushing the idea to children that they absolutely have to go to college if they want to make something of themselves. And that's a crock. My brother-in-law, he's making really good money as an electrician, more so than people with 4- and 6-year degrees. Getting back to to people actually filling jobs that are necessary. You know, it's not looked down upon to be an electrician or a plumber or a millwright or a pipe fitter or anything like that. Those are valuable members of society. But what has happened is the government has in tune, you know, pushed the idea upon children that you are worthless unless you go to college and get a degree. Going into trades is for you know, the dumb kids. Well, that's totally not true. So what ended up happening is everybody goes to college, they get a degree. Well, now you have a bunch of degrees and they're all worthless. So now, because everybody has to go to college to make something of themselves, they jack up tuition. So pretty much it's the federal government's fault, and then the federal government should not be in the business of guaranteeing loans. You know, there needs to be competition. I saw John Stossel one time, he mentioned something upon the way of you go to college for free, and you get a direct payment with the school itself after you get out, where they take a percentage of what you make. And this is a personal individual contract that people should be able to have with schools. So it's a payback program where they take maybe 10% of your paycheck for however many years, only if you're actually able to get a job with the degree you earned from their school. And I think that's a great idea. I mean, it's a somewhere to start. I mean, I don't have all the answers on this one, but I mean, that's just one idea of many. And it's a very, very issue that our young people need to fix. We need to fix for our young people so they don't come out as debt slaves.
Robbie?
Yeah, so I certainly agree with you, Charles, on some of what you said over there. And part of the problem, the reason tuition is so high, Tim started with this. Tuition in college has skyrocketed when the government came in during the Obama years, thank you, Obama, and decided the government's gonna take on the entire student loan debt. It's not gonna be done by banks anymore. And for equality purposes, they uncapped it. So if it used to be that a student could get $10,000 per semester in loan, they decided uncapped. So schools, well, wait a second, I'll charge 50 now because if you could get it from the government, you'll pay it later. And all colleges and all universities went up and uncapped and tripled and more the amount of tuition they're charging, which is ridiculous. Students are making a contract, they're borrowing this money from the government, getting degrees in, I don't know, swan dancing and who knows what. You can't do anything with these degrees. You can't get a job, and then they owe the money. They're turning to the government like, hey, erase my debt. What'd you borrow the money for? In real life, you borrow money, you have to pay it back. You can't turn around and say, hey, you know what, I invested it in the stock and it went bust, so I don't owe you the money anymore. It doesn't work like that. We do live in a society, less now, but they used to push college education, like that's the main thing. Like Charles said, if you don't do that, you know, you're a lesser person somehow. I don't know that it's necessarily the government pushing that idea, but society certainly did. Both my older daughters, who are now married, did not go to college. They went to trade school. One is a hairdresser, one went to surgical tech school, and they have fine jobs and they are working with that. We need to push trade school, and the regular supply and demand of the open market, all of a sudden, all these colleges won't be able to get 50 grand a semester. They're gonna have to lower their prices or keep their seats empty and go belly up. Deregulate, not add more regulation. Get the government out of as many things as possible. They don't do anything well.
Mr. Butenhofer?
Yeah, so the class of 2018, there was 69% of college students took out student loans, and they graduated with an average of $29,800 in debt, including private and federal debt. Meanwhile, 14% of the parents took out an average of $35,600 in federal parent plus loans. And Americans owe $1.56 trillion in student loans, spread out amongst 45 million borrowers. That's 521 billion more than the total US credit card debt, just to give you a little idea. Pretty much everybody said what I would say, just to kind of ducktail what Charles was talking about. It's independent share agreements is what he's talking about, and I advocate for that on my website, and more income-based tuition. So where it's at right now is it's about enrollment, and the colleges are focused on enrollment as opposed to career placement. And so if the incentive is to enroll, then they don't care what you do with it afterwards, which is why they take these bizarre courses and majors. So if we're focused on what they're making afterwards, and we're basing the payment of that, based on the classes that they took, then it encourages the student to make smarter choices, if they're gonna go to college. Now, again, Gabby said is absolutely correct. They don't necessarily have to go to college, we just, as parents, sometimes continuously instill that upon them, like skills, trade, apprenticeships. Certainly we can look down these avenues too. So Purdue University has already implemented this, and they're seeing wonderful results, and I think it's going on in other pockets too. So again, it's another one of those free market, get the government out of the situation, and we can do better.
Alright, so, my next question is, what would you do to expand free speech on college campuses? Because many of us may probably know that it's something that's very attacked, on a lot of more liberal ones, but even in some, more conservative ones, free speech, especially for conservatives, is even attacked, and, Mr. Kelly will begin.
I cut funding, until they eliminate speech codes, until they eliminate bias response teams, until they eliminate all these, diversity, roles, I'd cut the funding. They do what they do because they're allowed to do it, and it needs to be, it just needs to be stopped. So I would, it's about funding, it's about, budgets are about priorities. As all these people, everybody at this table agrees, for the last 25 years, 30 years, everybody had to have a baccalaureate degree. That's what we pushed everybody to do. We killed career and technical education in the process. We killed job training. That, thankfully, in the last 5 or 10 years, has started to come back. We've started to reinvest in career and technical education in our local high schools, bringing it back. I think also on college campuses. So I think, one of the good things that might have come out of this COVID nonsense is it might kill higher ed as we know it, and traditional public school as we know it, because you've created a situation now where parents are finding out that there are other alternatives to educating their kids than what's been provided. And I think that weighing against the cost, the skyrocketing cost associated with all this, is gonna really change the dynamics of how that plays out.
Mr. Patrick?
Like what Tim started out with saying, that the free speech on college campuses, it wasn't like that back when I was in school. If you wanted to participate in an event, you went to it. If you thought that it was something that you didn't want to participate in, you didn't go to it. It's crazy when you see isolated riots take place on college campuses just because Michelle Mifflin or Charlie Kirk want to go speak at a college campus. It's ridiculous. Just don't go. And I totally go with what Tim's saying about defund that school. If you're not allowing free speech on campuses, then we're missing out on that opportunity. Something else that Tim mentioned about the career tech or career or job skills training. We tore down Inkster Public Schools shop class, their woodworking class, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And we were loading lathes and chop saws and table saws into dumpsters, and they were working when we unplugged them. All my guys were like, this is gonna come back to haunt us. We don't have shop class, we don't have home ec, we don't have all these other classes. So when I graduated from college, I said, you know what, every kid needs to have a 2-year internship. So I was educated in the hospitality and tourism management industry, and then now I'm in the construction industry. I think every kid should have to do a year of internship in the hospitality industry. You gotta know how to make your bed, you gotta know how to do your laundry, and you gotta know how to cook your meal. Now, I didn't say you need to run a hotel or a restaurant, but you need to know how to do those things. The construction industry, you don't need to know how to build a house, but you need to know how to turn the water off underneath the sink when the pipe bursts, not to have to call a plumber. There's just basic things that we have lost by defunding the tech schools and programs like that. Sorry.
Well, yeah, of course defund, but I would also go a step further and have federal civil rights violation charges brought upon the school administration and or specific teachers, civil lawsuits, whatever we can do, because we have to set a precedent here in this nation that free speech shall not be quenched. We have our First Amendment rights, and especially at a school that is federally funded. I mean, that's insane. I mean, what you kids experience on college campuses nowadays with the complete and utter disregard for the whole idea of college, which is supposed to be the free exchange of ideas, that it makes me sick to my stomach to see what's going on. So yes, I would definitely advocate for civil rights violation charges on schools and teachers.
Robbie?
So I'm really not sure why we're funding a lot of these Ivy schools to start with. Regardless of the free speech issue, why are taxpayers giving money to schools that have billions of dollars in endowments? They have more than the government does. Ever since we started, they increased the amount that they could charge for tuition, they increased the amount of federal money the federal government gives them, our tax dollars, for some strange reason. And all they do is they keep giving themselves pay increases. The amount of money and the amount of times they give themselves pay increases and bonuses and healthcare, you'd think that they work for Congress with those type of stuff. But the reality is that none of the Ivy League schools, they should be treated like a business. You're a school, you're a private school. If people want to enroll and pay you that kind of money, giddy up. If they don't, make your own adjustments. Why are we subsidizing that? As far as local schools and trade schools and state colleges, they should be funded, and they should be funded. I see a case for that, but that should also be reasonable. And there should definitely be, you gotta comply in order to get federal money. I think it's a simple, it's not even in fine print, it's part of the agreement that the federal government makes with the school. So somehow many of these things become an issue when they really shouldn't be an issue, so.
Mr. Dudenhofer?
Yeah, all these ideas have merit. Thanks for mentioning them, everybody. And I think in addition to, I would say too that reinstituting civics in high school, even before the kids go to college, they're learning basic civics. And within that context, they'll learn about speech. I think there's organizations already doing some good work. Certainly the FIRE.org is something that you folks could support. The acronym is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. They use a color-charted code, so to speak, based on input from all the schools around the country. Wayne State, for example, is in the orange to red usually. I've gone there myself and worked with the students on some different fun free speech ideas, like bouncing around a gigantic beach ball and offering people to write whatever they want to write on it, even if it's a curse word or whatever. Just it's free speech and it's fun. And so those kinds of things. In 2016, I think we also hosted a debate watching party, and we invited the college Democrats, college Republicans, college independents, in different social groups, and all got into a room and expressed themselves freely. And so putting that into practice, I think, is another way. So there's certainly some things we can do to change the mindset. Funding, of course, has a lot to do with it too, and the encouragement of these organizations that have the funding and have the ability to go out there and try to stifle other groups. So we could certainly look at those things as well. But I also think a lot of this is just the mindset, and where it starts is before you get to college. One last thing I'll say is that the students that are swayed by some of these Marxist groups are also swayed because of the debt issue again. And the Marxist groups are feeding on the fact that you're now in debt, so come join us because we're gonna work for free, and oh, by the way, squash all these Republican groups because they're the Antichrist. So I think that, if we can solve the student debt, that would go a long way to solving the issue of free speech on campus too. So it all ties together.
So, my last question before closing statements, and this might be something that somebody might actually want to talk about. What are some negative qualities about your Democrat opponent?
Seriously?
What are some negative qualities about your
Really?
Democrat opponent do you think you could use to swing over Democrat voters onto your base, which is something that you are going to need in order to win these elections? Mr. Dudenhofer, we'll begin with you on this one.
Hostility, control, and division.
Amen.
Keep it real simple.
All right. Robbie?
Well, the current congressman who's holding the seat clearly is in there, voting and executing his own ideology, not the interest of the people of the 9th District. Two examples that I'm gonna put out, because they're very simple. Number one, he has voted against the USMCA. The USMCA is projected to bring a lot of jobs to his district, and he voted against it because it wasn't green enough for him. That's strike one with many people. Number two, right now, during this pandemic, however you agree with what's going on, the reality is here. And while there are many people in the district who are suffering financially, who gave up their businesses and they lost their businesses, they don't have any income, they're eligible for unemployment, but for whatever reason, the state system isn't, people are struggling right now. And our current congressman is busy writing legislation to send a lot of money over to North Korea to help them right now. This is what he's focused on. He doesn't care about the people of the 9th District. I also think that I'll be able to sway a lot of people on the Israel issue. I was born and raised in Israel. I served in the Israeli Defense Forces. I'm pro-Israel, which is a position that I believe is a pro-America view as well. But Andy specifically took a lot of anti-Israel positions, clearly criticizing, advocating against, writing letters to the president, to the State Department, anti-Israel letters, getting signatures. Many of the Democratic, liberal-leaning Jewish demographic in this district, I believe, could be swayed to vote for me on that issue. So that's why I think I have a chance at winning the general.
Mr. Langworthy?
Well, like Gabi said, the Andy Levin voted against the USMCA, which is completely and utterly insane, considering that the 9th District is filled with a bunch of auto workers and people who work for auto worker distributors and tier 1, tier 2, 3 suppliers. One big issue that I found, especially again amongst independents and quite a few even Democrats, they're sick and tired of his legacy. They're sick and tired of the family name and the nepotism. The simple fact that Sander, his father, took office in 1983, the year before I was born, and just gave it over to his son in 2019. That's one issue that Democrats are really want too, is term limits. So that I know Andy's only been in there a little bit, but it's an extension of his father, who of course is an extension of his father, who got in the 40s, and then Carl, he was in there, 20 some odd years, something like that, as our senator. That nepotism issue, that's big with, that's a bipartisan issue that people are really sick and tired of. And the simple fact that, Mr. Levin really hasn't done anything at all to help fix the roads of the 9th District. There's federal funding out there. And, people in the 9th District want our roads funded. And we need to get our roads fixed. There's federal money you can go out and grab. It's out there for grabs, so you might as well try to grab it for your district. And he hasn't done anything in the US Congress to, I know mostly it's a state issue for auto insurance, but there's gotta be some things that the federal government can do to help lower auto insurance rates here in the state. Our auto insurance rates are by far the highest in the nation. And there has to be some way the federal government can work with the states, and something's gotta be done. I don't have the answer on it, but I know it's something that's really affecting the people of the 9th District. Lots of people drive without insurance, and that affects a lot of Democrats too, so.
Makes it easy for us.
Yeah, exactly. The Brenda Lawrence has pretty much just coasted her entire political career. Starting off, she retired from the post office, and actually when we were getting signatures, someone said, Brenda Lawrence used to work for the post office. I'm like, yeah, I knew that. They said Brenda Lawrence is the only one that never carried a letter at the post office. It seemed like every time that there was a hey, pickup route, she was hiding around the corner. So her attendance record has been bad since she started. When she was, right now she's got the second worst attendance record. She's not doing the job. That's the biggest thing. And nobody's challenged her. The last couple elections, nobody's really put in to get a challenge. I know the Republican committee or Republican Party is at the last minute thrown somebody in there. Hey, we'll get your signatures. You're good. Go up there. But I think I'm the first one that's actually gone out there and, like Tim said, bought some signs, put them out there, worked the district. She relies on Southfield and Lathrop Village and Oak Park for her vote. She doesn't go into Detroit. She hasn't gone up to Kego Harbor or Sylvan Lake, and then all the way down under the bridge down to Delray. I'm traveling the entire gerrymandered crazy district that it is. In fact, I just had one of my volunteers ask the other day, they said, how big, what do you think the district is? I said, you know what, I got a little project for you. Trace the line and figure out how many miles this district is, because I'll bet it's 200 miles. So Brenda, it's time for her to go, and I really would like the opportunity to knock her out.
I thought my district was bad, yours is worse. You have Pontiac at one end,
Yeah.
and you have Grosse Pointe and the Grosse Pointe Farms and Shores at the other.
Under the bridge at the other end.
That's just crazy.
Mr. Kelly?
One of the things I hope to get out, Dan Kildee is one of the founders of a thing called the Free Thinkers Caucus in Congress. And I want you to Google this tonight. This is it's purported to be, it's about defending non-religious people. But all the links go to atheist links. These people want to remove God from the public square, pure and simple. And I think that if the people of the 5th District knew this, Democrat and Republican, were aware that their sitting congressman was a part of something like this, they would be appalled. This isn't anything he talks about, but I'm sure when they get together behind closed doors in Washington, this is the kind of stuff that they talk about. So I think that is one of the, bigger knocks against him more than anything. And I think if the message gets out, it could very well prove to be his downfall.
All right. So since we're kind of running short in time, I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer this, and this is closing statements. Mr. Kelly, you go.
I'm gonna start off by saying, I can tell you, when I first walked in here tonight, and I've been to these things where you got more candidates than audience members, but I can tell you this, I'm proud of every one of these that I'm sitting with today, every one of these gentlemen that are at this table, and I can guarantee you that the country would be far better off, and the districts that they run for would be far better off if these people were elected.
Mr. Pat?
Again, thank you guys for having us out. I know I've come to a couple of your other forums, and you guys have done a great job. Thank you for doing this. That too, right? No, I forgot. No, again, we're all so identical up here. And I say the red team, I joke about that, but the Republicans, we've got to get in to save this country. And like Tim said, everybody up here, I've met a lot of the candidates in all the districts that are running, and I just think the family feel. Spencer, I took him to the Trump rally, and I said, once you get inside, you're gonna have this overwhelming family feeling, and this is my family here. And I cannot express, if you've not had the opportunity to do a Trump rally. We stood outside in 18-degree weather for 6 hours, froze our ass off. I was giving away hand warmers to all the people in line. Of course, my sign too, I was giving them those, but the huge family feeling of this party, that's why I'm here, and I'm here right now.
Mr. Langworthy?
Well, I'm here to bring back the Constitution and the vision our founding fathers had for this country. And, you know, we are facing a full-fledged communist takeover, and you know, all I know how to do is fight, like I've said many times, but it's true. I mean, you can ask my buddy Jerry over here. He knows, you know, I've been able to fight and scrap every single day my entire life to keep my head above water. And I know exactly what it's like, and I'm gonna fight and scrap and get down in the mud and do whatever it has to do to bring back our liberty, our freedom, and justice, and our rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. God-given rights that are enshrined in the Constitution.
John?
Right, yeah, I'd like to take my last minute to discuss a question that I get a lot from the audience here and the online audience. I'd like to discuss, I get asked a lot about the fact that I don't live in the 9th District, yet I'm running to represent the 9th District. Well, the fact is that I live less than a mile outside the district as it's drawn right now. But it's the Constitution that allows me to run and represent any district in the state that I live in. And I just don't think that if we're gonna fight to protect constitutional right, it's the left who only picks and chooses what they like and how they distort it. If it's a constitutional right, it's a constitutional right. There's no picking and choosing and fighting which ones we like to enforce and which ones not. Not to mention the fact that, the district is getting redrawn right after this election, so there's a very good chance that I am gonna live in the district that I win the general election in, and the current, representative, won't be. It's getting redrawn, so that's, not necessarily a major factor. And then to those who ask me, the last thing I tell them in closing, if where I live, less than a mile outside of the district, is the biggest objection you have for my candidacy, I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Mr. Dutenhofer?
Well, thank you for having me. This was quite a drive. I don't know how I'm gonna get home. And thank you for all the panel that was on here. I've actually learned a little bit from each of you tonight, so I appreciate that as well. And I think that this is gonna be the 4th election in a row that was the most important election of my lifetime. So, just know this, the Constitution is rooted in natural law, which comes from faith. And as long as we're rooted in faith, I believe that our answers are there. And it took me a lot of years to kind of get to that, but I think we'll be fine. I think we just have to keep fighting and recognize that the great silent majority can't be silent anymore. We've got to get vocal, but we've got to do it in the name of faith and maintain our constitutional republic. And it comes down to family too. So we keep all those things together and keep it in perspective. At the end of the day, we're going to be just fine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for coming. Before you go, I would just like to take a picture of all this right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, you can ask
a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's somehow become a huge.
You know, you guys are, everybody likes to talk about the Constitution, and maybe somebody doesn't see the same thing I see in this, but there was recently a Supreme Court decision that was made that, in my opinion, had more effect or potential effect on the Constitution since the Civil War. The faithless elector. The case was sort of rooted in politics because the left wanted to strategically undermine our electoral college system. They failed. Now, with that in mind, when the election takes place in November, is it possible that a state will not be able to conclude who their electors will support